Thank you for having me here. We have heard a lot about the human dimension of architecture, and that was very inspiring. And now we really also have to address the material dimension of architecture. And I don't know if you have asked yourself the question, what is sort of the most important insight which you got from the pandemic? And for me, one of the very important insights, at least also insights which gave me hope, is that I thought, or I believe, that humanity has understood what exponential growth really means. And exponential growth in a pandemic is one thing, but exponential growth in the economy, which is tied and fueled by material consumption, is something different. And the dilemma we have created with that has been formulated very beautiful by Canadian philosopher and economist Kenneth Boulding, who said, anyone who believes in indefinite growth on a physically finite planet is either mad or an economist. And I think this is exactly what we have as a problem as humanity. We have unilaterally become used to look through this economic lens and thinking that the economic reality is the only reality which really counts. But we have forgotten that in essence, we are not only guests on planet Earth, we are guests of planet Earth. And if you're a guest of someone, you better adhere to the house rules. And we have created an economic system which completely ignores the house rules of Mother Earth. We have created linear industrial processes as if we had an endless supply of resources. We have created an economic model based on material consumption, exponentially growing material consumption. And what that means in the construction industry has struck me a couple of years ago by this picture. What you see here is the concrete consumption of the United States in the entire 20th century. And this 1.5 times as much has been consumed by China in just 3 years. So this is what we are talking about when we talk about exponential growth. And we are fueling that sort of artificially by the consumption models which we've created. As a child, I used that phone in my grandmother's house even in the 80s. And I'm not talking functionality, but that our kids are being used to throw that thing away every 2 years is madness. And if we are realizing that a cubic meter of my mobile phones contains more gold than a cubic meter of gold ore of one of the richest mines in the world, and not only gold, but silver and the whole rare earth metals we are talking about when we're talking about crises, then we understand that what we've created is sincerely madness. So we have to start thinking of redesigning our complete system, not only our cities, but redesigning our complete economic system. And what does that mean? It means that we have to rethink how we produce buildings, materials, everything which we consume, but we have also to think about how we use things. So how we produce with less, how we produce with what we already have been using, but also how do we use products longer? How do we use them more intensely? How do we use them together in order to make sure that we really use them to their full potential and use less materials? And this is just an example we created together a couple of years ago with Schiphol Airport of Amsterdam and Philips. And the Airport of Amsterdam has the problem that they are remodeling their lounges every 15 years. But what they could get as a lighting installation in the market would only last for 6 years. It's a very bad business case, as you can imagine, 3 times the lighting installation in the course of 15 years. So they turned to us and said, could you help us please with this dilemma? And so we said, well, let's just turn it around and ask Philips to deliver light instead of lighting equipment. And you pay just for the service. And Philips is owner of the problem. And that is what happened. So we signed a contract for 15 years with Philips, and it turned out that the problem why the installation was breaking down after 6 years was just a tiny little driver. I think everybody of us knows that there are so many products that have just this one little thing which breaks down, but you can't repair it anymore and it's useless, so you have to dismantle everything. And in that case, now this little driver is under a lid in front of the installation. You just can open it. It's even monitored by IoT. And Philips has an uptime of 24 hours, 7 days a week, which they can guarantee to Schiphol Airport for 15 years, maybe even longer. And just imagine the amount of materials we are saving through that system. But that all comes down to design. We have to rethink how we're designing, and also not only what we're designing anew, but also how do we design with what we already have. And this is a building which we got commissioned as raw architects in 2012. And the owner just wanted to demolish everything. And we said, no, if you look at the embedded carbon in this building, this is just not sustainable, it's not responsible. So we kept 90% of what was there, and also the rest of the building, which we couldn't keep, was reused. And we covered the whole structure with a big, big roof. And our ambition was that we could preserve not only what was there, but preserve in the future everything which we would bring in anew. And one big challenge was this huge steel construction, which we wanted to make sure that it can be easily assembled, disassembled, transported, and reassembled. And we couldn't find anyone in the market who could help us with that dilemma. So we turned to ourselves and asked, who are these people who can build this type of structures? And we found out that roller coaster companies can very well make steel constructions which you can easily assemble, disassemble, transport and reassemble. And so we turned to that roller coaster company, and they thought we were mad, saying, no, we are building roller coasters, you understood, not roofs. We said, well, probably you can design a horizontal roller coaster. And that's what happened. And guess what? It's even 30% less steel, because every kilo of steel they have transport costs some fuel. So that is their business model. And I think the solutions, many of the solutions are already out there. We just have to think translaterally and beyond, across the borders we already are of our known environment. So this is in fact a building as a material depot. We also designed another building which we call a building as a material bank. It's a new building, completely CO2 positive, meaning it sequesters more carbon than it emitted, and you can deconstruct this whole building. And the value of these materials is being kept in a material passport, because we believe waste is in fact a material without identity. So by giving material a known identity, we can keep its value and we can reuse it in the future. But having only a few buildings with material passports will not take us very far. So what we did is we created a platform. We created the MADASTER, the CADASTRE for materials. So by documenting material in an online public platform, giving them an identity, but also, very importantly, a financial value, we'll make sure that we are keeping our buildings, and we will not depreciate them to zero any longer. We will depreciate them to their minimal material value. And that is a big opportunity and interest also for banks and all investors, because somehow you're creating an extra safety level in your investment. And in fact, that way we are going to create sort of a material library in our economies. In order, in fact, to do that, we have to redesign the whole value creation chain, as we at the moment call it, but in fact it is a value destruction chain, because when you look at it, we are taking material from planet Earth and we're turning it into waste, but we need a value sustain chain. We need to make sure that material also can go back in the whole economic system, and that there are specialized companies which are able to turn materials which have been used again into raw materials, but also that materials and products are designed in a way that you can use them much longer and use them and reuse them, as I already said. So in fact, we envision that material will in the future be moving like that, in the forward direction in value creation, and in the backward direction in the value sustain chain. And we also have to rethink the ownership of materials. Maybe material is a sort of commons, and maybe we have to really start paying for the service material, for the right to use material. And with that comes, we think, also the right for material not longer to become waste. So what we did in 2018, we presented the UN, the Universal Declaration of Material Rights, because we believe material has the right of being used, remaining utile and not becoming waste. And in order to do so, I think we as humanity need to adapt a completely different attitude towards everything which makes our life possible. So we have to really start thinking in generations, and this picture could be me and my little daughter, so it sort of has this emotional appeal to me, and I believe that we should treat material, every material, as a precious Swiss watch, and therefore I borrowed my statement of Patek Philippe saying, you never actually own a material, you merely take care of it for the next generation. Thank you so much.